Hi, this is Jesse from the Grawlix podcast, and today we're on location at Grand Comic Con. We're on the second day of the con, and I am with Andrew Schmidt from Andrew's Clay Creations and More. Good morning.
Good morning, Jesse.
Also want to let our listeners know that we have only been up for a couple of hours. We're getting ready for the last day of the con. I'm using a digital recorder on site, so the sound is going to be a little bit different, and we might sound a little tired, but we're still going to keep it interesting. So, Andrew, tell our listeners, because you do a very visual medium, tell the audio listeners what it is that you create. What are Andrew's Clay Creations and More?
Well, Andrew's Clay Creations and More are miniatures, figurines, and stuff that I sculpt out of polymer clay. It's brands like Primo Sculpey, Sculpey 3, and Fimo. Mainly I use Primo Sculpey. You can buy it at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, online. It's an oven-baked clay, and it's pre-colored, so you don't have to paint it. And that is my main form of medium. But I also sculpt with Warbla, which a lot of cosplayers use for their armor, and it's a type of thermoplastic. And then I sculpt with felted wool, so it's called needle felting. So that's where the Clay Creations and More comes from, where I was starting with Clay Creations and I felt I was limiting myself. So I just added the and more. If I was going to do it all again, I would just call it Andrew's Creations. It's a lot shorter. And so I just went with Andrew's Clay Creations and More, and that's where I'm at now.
So what are you most well known for in terms of the things that you have on your table? So if people are walking by your table at a con, what can they expect to see?
My most popular item are my one-eyed blobs, which originally I started at craft shows. I did craft shows before I started doing conventions, which is a different audience. And craft shows is a lot of moms or parents, and they drag their kids with them to look at these different crafts, or a lot of them are home-based businesses. And the mom doesn't want to buy their kid a $10 figurine that they know the kid's going to break, because it is clay, it is breakable. So I'm like, what could I come up with that was inexpensive but yet fun? So I was watching Monsters vs. Aliens, and they have that Bob character.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I could do something like that out of clay. Plus, it was nice because if I'm doing a bigger project and you know the clay is pre-colored, so lots of times I'll mix something together for a certain character, and I have these little scraps left. I could take those scraps and make these one-eyed blobs. That's, on the lower end. I'm also known, I do these shell monsters. So I'll take actual seashells and make some kind of creature coming out of it. And then I just make all kinds of different creatures, monsters, and then I like to occasionally do characters from pop culture. I like doing video game characters, and to me it's more fun to do, I don't want to say obscure characters, but characters that aren't as represented in merchandise. So if you like, I don't want to necessarily do Mario because everybody has Mario.
Right.
But if you do some, like a character like Hollow Knight I've done recently, where the game's very popular, but the only merchandise out there is a plush that came with like a collector's edition. So the mainstream fans aren't going to have access to that.
So it's things that you can't find or buy at Walmart.
Right.
So
because the normal con-goer or customer, it's not as important to them whether it's one of a kind. It's like how much it costs and how it looks. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to Walmart and buying Luke Skywalker for $20 in a Black Series figurine, they don't want to buy my sculpture of Luke Skywalker for $50.
Right.
Not saying there's not an audience for it, but if you have a character that isn't represented, they're more willing to spend that money because they don't have as many opportunities to get something from that, IP.
Right, that makes sense. So you mentioned Hollow Knight. Give me maybe your top 5 characters, either that you just enjoyed making or that people, you made it and boom, they bought it.
Last year at Comic Con, I had ready the Piranha Plant, which is, again, it's from Mario. So Mario's heavily merchandised, but some of the minor characters in that aren't. Mm-hmm. So I did a pretty good size one out of Warbla, and that got a lot of attention to my table, and it did sell fairly quickly. One of the larger pieces I did was Swamp Thing. I have a life-size Swamp Thing bust at my table. It hasn't sold. It's a higher-priced item. But, Swamp Thing, again, it's, from DC Comics, which is very popular, but it's not like the big three like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman where you see everywhere.
Right.
So he's recognizable. People know who he is, but if you want Swamp Thing merchandise, you're not going to Walmart or Target to get it. A few years back, I did characters from Binding of Isaac, and that was when it was only on Steam before it hit like the Switch and, all the other consoles. And when I put those in my Etsy shop, they sold out instantly.
Right.
If I was a machine, I would be just making Binding of Isaac characters, but I can't do that. I have to make stuff different. I mean, because this is my part-time job, so I want to keep it interesting for me.
Sure.
It's my escape, so, I kind of bounce around.
So we kind of talked about, and the Piranha Plant, I've seen it. It's a combination of several mediums. Like you had some I assume you had some Sculpey and some Warbler was definitely involved.
With the Piranha Plant, he was Warbler, but I used foil and wire for the stem to give it strength. Mm-hmm. And then I bought a big PVC pipe from Menards to represent the pipes that would come out of in the game. And then I painted it all with acrylic patio paint, which is a pretty inexpensive paint you can get, but it has a built-in sealant in it. If people aren't familiar with patio paint, my wife had painted a bunch of flower pots with patio paint and put them outside, and it's withstood weather, so I thought this is going to be durable enough. Even though it's an inexpensive paint, it still has worked really well for, covering Warbler and stuff like that.
Right. So we've kind of talked about a little bit what you do with clay. The Piranha Plant's a good example of what you do with Warbler. What about the needle felt? What could you expect to see in terms of those?
One of my favorite pieces I've done with needle felt, and this is one of those, actually I have two that are kind of a mixed media, is I did a Totoro from My Neighbor Totoro. And so needle felt, you think of like a plush, but you don't do any sewing. And so you take these barbed needles and you run it through this wool roving, and as you continue to stab the wool roving
over and over
again. Like, I don't know how else to explain it.
Like a needle, like a puppet serial killer.
Yeah, think of a zip tie. As the more you stab it, the wool roving will tighten and it becomes more firm. So the firmer you want it, the more you stab it. And so
this sounds like good stress relief.
It is, until you stab yourself, and then you're just like,
it's stress inducing.
Yeah. So I've made a few new Totoros, and for them, I have sculpted like the whiskers, his big smile, and his eyes out of clay, and glued those on. Mm-hmm. And I really, to me, has a good look to it. And probably the best character for that is I did a Niffler from Fantastic Beasts,
right? And
I did his nose and his hands and his feet out of clay, and then his body out of needle felt. And then I used glass beads for his eyes. So he has a bunch of different mediums in there. But it really, I think, captured the look of the character by doing that.
Right. We kind of talked about like pop culture things because that's the easiest thing to explain to an audience, obviously. But you also do a lot of original creations, kind of like your one-eyed blobs and your shell monsters that you mentioned. What are some of the new things that you've recently been putting out?
So I wanted to do something a little bit bigger than the one-eyed blobs, a little more, give me a little more creative freedom. Even though the blobs are all different, there still have to be that one-eyed blob format. Yeah. So I started a new monster called Wonky Weirdlings. And so I'm doing those as blind bags. They'll be in my Etsy shop, but right now they're on my table at Grand Comic Con today. But obviously your listeners aren't going to be able to go to Grand, but I will have them in my Etsy shop and at future conventions. Those, I take kind of a ball of foil and I cover that with the clay. I mix up different colors, so each one's a different color. Add two eyes. One of the traits of them is they have glow-in-the-dark eyes. Sculpey 3 has glow-in-the-dark clay that is, a really good glow-in-the-dark material. Sometimes you'll get something that's glow-in-the-dark and it's kind of just...
It's sort of glow-in-the-dark,
It's a very light glow. These have a very strong glow to them, which, for kids is a lot of fun, but I say that knowing that I love glow-in-the-dark stuff, but I'm kind of a big kid, so so I'm like, if I like it, kids probably like it, and that's, so far have been the case. So I try to do these little... Think of kind of like Mad Balls, if your listeners are familiar with Mad Balls.
Right.
They're, almost a ball shape with a face. They don't have the gross stuff on them, but there's just this ball-shaped character.
Right.
So that's my newest thing. I do want to start on a new needle felt kind of monster to do in some kind of blind bag or something, but haven't finished the design of that yet to start working on those.
Sure. Like talking about the process, and I think we've done as good a job as anyone can do in audio about describing the process. But recently you've started some new endeavors where people can actually see how it's done, how the sausage or blobs are made.
Yes, I have a YouTube channel, and so I'll plug that. Is Andrew's Clay Creations and More on YouTube. So if you search for that, and you'll see a little yellow monster, that's my channel. So if your listeners want to subscribe, see how I make the stuff, I post 2 videos a week. One's usually a more in-depth video of the process, so if they want to know that. The first one's posted on Monday. The second one's on Thursday. Thursday's video is usually a quick look, so it'll be maybe something, it's something I've done before, or it could be a different variation of something I did a longer video. So recently I did the Necronomicon from Evil Dead, and I used an old math book. It took me about 9 hours to sculpt it and about 7 hours to edit the video. So I have a very in-depth video on how that process was done. So if I do another version of the Necronomicon, I might just do a short video of it because I don't need to revisit that long, format for it.
More like hit the key points of what's different this
Right.
time, or what you learned last time and
Yeah.
you were able to change. Or
I didn't know if that's something my audience would want, like just seeing what I made. But I had a comment that really, reassured me. Sometimes you need that reassurance when you're doing art.
feedback.
Yeah, and she said, the Monday video that's more in depth could be help people learn the process, and the Thursday video can be more to inspire people. I never thought about making that, or I never thought about adding that to something.
Sure.
So I was really touched when, she said that. And, those positive comments keep you going. And if you get negative ones, you just ignore them.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't make everybody happy, and that's totally fine. Everybody has the right to their opinion.
Or on the Grawlix podcast, when we get hate mail, we beat that over and over and over like a drum until it's not even funny anymore.
I've been very fortunate that I haven't, received anything real negative on my channel. I'll get a thumbs down, and a friend of mine, her daughter's in one of my videos, and it has 2 thumbs down. And she's like, "Why did you get thumbs down?" And I'm like, "I don't know, because it's YouTube. They can either like or dislike, and people can dislike something for whatever reason. It's like, oh, they didn't like the color of the shirt she was wearing, or they didn't like my blobs, or they didn't like the sound, or you make one little thing and they might not like it.
Right.
It's like, at least I'm not a Sony's Ghostbusters trailer dislike.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think I'm doing okay. As long as I stay ahead. I do wish, if I ever get to the point where I have a video that has more dislikes than likes, hopefully that never happens. But I hope I get some feedback of why, because there's content I want to do, but you also want to make sure it's appealing to your audience, because without your audience, what's the point?
Right. Speaking of what's the point, what inspired you to start a YouTube channel at all?
I'm a big fan of YouTube, so I watch a lot of YouTube. I'm going to call her an online friend. I've never met her. It's Jackie from Nerdy Crafter. I've watched her channel. She started several years ago. When I started watching her channel, she was at 24,000 subscribers, which to me is that's an incredible number. Now she's approaching 1 million subscribers.
Whoa.
She has between 700 and 800,000 followers. And I thought, I like the way she connected with her audience. And in all honesty, I'm self-taught on sculpting, but a lot of the stuff I learned was from watching her channel. And so part of me is like, well, I want to share my creations. That's why I do conventions, and I have Instagram and Facebook, because you have that need, as a human, or at least I do, to be, appreciated.
So you are a human.
Well, yes, I hate to admit it, but don't tell my wife. Hope she doesn't listen to it, because I try to admit to her I am not a human. But you want that appreciation from other people. I've been doing this consistently for 8 years, and so now it's like, it's nice to, when even at a convention or on, the YouTube channel, when somebody comments or, comes up and like, oh, I love that. To me, the sales are nice because it's expensive to make art,
right?
So you want something back so I can keep making art, but it's just as rewarding, if not more, to get that encouragement. When people see something, and it's like, to me, it's a miracle sometimes when they recognize it, like, oh, I did a good enough job that's recognized as Venom.
Sure, yeah.
Even if they don't see the sign that's Venom, it's like, that's Venom, they know. But also when they get so excited that it's one of their favorite characters, and and they're like, oh, can I pick it up? Can I look at it? I'm like, oh, of course, so that's a lot of fun, and that's the fun of doing conventions, is interacting with people that enjoy your art. Facebook and Instagram are a fun way to share it, but you don't get a lot of feedback, and you don't even know who sees it, because when I first started doing that, I'm like, oh, nobody's liking it, like, oh, they don't like my stuff. Well, then I learned from my wife. She just scrolls through stuff. I mean, she sees stuff. She likes it.
Like, oh, that's cool, and then just keeps going.
Yeah, but she doesn't click that button.
Yeah, so you don't know that she's like, oh, that's cool.
Right, and that's what I learned also from conventions, because like people will say, oh, I saw your stuff online. And I'm like, well, I know, it got 2 likes that, and I've already know who those are. So like, other people are seeing it and they appreciate it.
Right.
So you can't worry about those numbers. It's like just, I think I'm kind of going off on a rant here.
No.
But it's like, you can't worry about numbers like that on social media, because a lot of people, either they're shy or they just, to them, they don't realize the difference it makes to comment or like on something, and they still appreciate your work, and when they see you in person and they, take time out of their day to say something to you, I mean, that's, amazing.
Right. I think I had that a couple of years ago at Comic-Con and we talk about it on the show, where it's like, I don't think anybody listens to the show. And I was recording with Daydream Instruction Manual. And while I'm doing that, a different podcaster comes up and they were like, oh, this is Jesse from Grawlix Podcast. And they were like, Grawlix Podcast, you guys are great. And I'm like, what? How do you, like, I didn't know that you listened.
Yeah.
Like, how would I know that, aside from you just told me?
So on that same note, I was always curious, like, can you guys tell how many listeners you have? Or, I mean, how does that work? Because the reason why I'm asking, because I'll download your podcast when I'm, take road trips, because, you live in Nebraska, like you have so many areas where the radio reception is crap, and I don't pay for radio. So I'm like, I'll just download a bunch of podcasts. So I know I'll download your guys', I'll download the ones from Mega, and I'll listen to those, but once I download it, it's like, obviously I'm not connected to the internet. Like, if I do listen to it or I don't listen to it, I mean, do you guys get any kind of feedback on...
and Randy could answer that question better than I, because he looks at the stats pretty much weekly. But it's different because, like, even how people ingest or take in their podcasting has changed, because more and more people are, like it used to be that people download it, put it on their iPod or their iPad, and, well, probably not iPad, but they download it to something.
Right.
So downloads was the end all be all, and it's still a big deal. Like that's still probably the best marker, like how many people are downloading. But now more people are streaming things, so it's like it's almost more important to have like how many listens, and so it just depends on like where your content is. Just like with YouTube, it's like you'll get certain metrics, like it's been viewed how many times, that you've got how many subscribers, that kind of thing. We can kind of tell how many subscribers we have based on the downloads. Like whether we've lost subscribers, then the downloads are probably going to be it's going to take a dip that month. It's like, and stay consistently at that new level. But then sometimes we'll have a big episode and people will just download that episode, and you can say, oh, well, that was a popular episode. But it's just like you were talking about. It's like you don't know what is and isn't going to be a hit. You know, like we just recently did some really incredible interviews, and you want them all to be the same in terms of people hearing about all these awesome creators. But it's just not, and you just can't predict like who's going to be the biggest draw. Who is your audience really going to key into? And you can promote it as much as you want, but that doesn't mean that people are going to listen. It doesn't mean that people are going to listen to it. It doesn't mean they're not going to listen to it. It's just, it's weird. It's as close as we're going to get to gambling without actual money.
Yeah. No, I get that. I was just curious on how that works, because I mean, I understand the YouTube side of it, at least the best I can, but I didn't know, because like I said, I've always downloaded your stuff. I think I've once streamed it when I've been home.
Sure.
But majority of the time, it's like hanging out with friends on a road trip,
Yeah, well, hopefully, that's the vibe I think we hopefully present. Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on, 20 minutes-ish. So we like to go ahead and just ask you, like, what are you into? Like, what are you listening to? What are you watching? What is your favorite things? That kind of stuff. So, like, is there anything that and it can be related to what you create, or it can just have nothing to do with it. Like, what are you excited about? What's coming up that you're excited about?
Well, probably what I'm most excited about is the sequel to the American 2014 Godzilla movie. I've been a huge fan of Godzilla literally as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
I still have, like the original Mattel Shogun Warrior Godzilla that I got for Christmas in 1978.
Yeah.
Which might show my age a little bit. But, and movies, especially in TV shows, they do affect what I make because either I'm inspired by it, or if it's popular, then you feel like, oh, maybe I should try that, just to see what kind of reception it gets. But I still try to stay true to my interest, so like Godzilla will be popular and I'll make some stuff from it, but if there's another movie that I'm not into, even though it's popular, if it doesn't have any, especially if it doesn't have any kind of creatures, because that's my area of expertise, then I might not go for that. But yeah, so I'm definitely excited about the new Godzilla movie. My wife has kind of made me rewatch all of the Game of Thrones to anticipation for the final season of that. I mean, she didn't really have to twist my arm to watch a fantasy show, but she's more into it than I am, which is rare. And then, of course, I mean, Avengers Endgame. I'm a huge comic book fan. I've been a comic book fan since the early '80s, so this is kind of like a dream come true for me to see all these well done, comic book movies. I mean, like the Superman and Batman from the '80s were great. But if you remember the Captain America movie,
I remember it.
Yeah,
I had to search for it too. It's like the Captain America movie wasn't just like you could just get it anywhere. You can just go to Walmart and pick up that Captain America movie. You had to seek out the pretty extensive video stores, and be like, hey, there it is, and it's actually in, because they only kept one copy of it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like TV shows, I mean, and I'm excited about the new Stranger Things. Love that show. And to me, it's like, I think for a lot of people, in my age group, that was us, in the 80s. I mean, I played D&D with my friends in their basements, and we played a lot of different tabletop games, went to the arcades, and it definitely hits that nostalgia, feels, without being too much forced on you.
It doesn't feel pandering.
Yeah. And I saw Captain Marvel, and I enjoyed it, but it did feel like it tried too hard to be 90s.
Yes. It was I mean, like my pet peeve in that movie, and I actually, my wife and I, we kind of debate movies after we go see, like, what do we like, what didn't we like, and I didn't like the fact that they did No Doubt's I'm Just a Girl. Like, I was fine with it being in the movie. I didn't like where they used it. Like, they used it in this pivotal fight scene. So, spoilers for folks that haven't seen it yet, but like the pivotal fight scene, that's where you get that song. And it's like, I would have liked that song in there because it's time relevant and it makes a lot of sense. I would have liked that song anywhere else in the movie, but not during this like massive beatdown drag out.
To me, it's almost like they could have put it somewhere else in the movie, but then also released a new music video for that song using the fight scene.
Oh, sure.
That way it's not interrupting the movie. Like, that's almost how it felt. Like, it was, because I agree with you. I mean, it felt like it was kind of interrupting the flow of the movie. Yeah. But it's like, that movie wanted to make sure you did not forget it was set in the 90s.
right. Along with, what was it, Windows XP and
Blockbuster and like waiting for the CD to load, which seems slower than I remember. But when you're watching something on a big screen, you can't do stuff in real time, because then you really realize how long something takes.
Sure, yeah.
So, as far as music, I kind of just listen to whatever's on the radio. I mean, if I'm in a mood, I'll listen to some like Weird Al or different stuff like that. But I have a pretty wide taste, so it's just whatever comes up.
Before we wrap it up, where can people find you, and what should they look for upcoming events that you're going to be doing?
Like I said, I'm on YouTube as Andrew's Clay Creations and More, and it's like, I mentioned earlier, you can just click on where the little yellow monster is. Please subscribe to my channel. Subscribes and views help out a lot. And, I try to, I try to read every user or viewer comment. So, I mean, if there's something you want to see me make, mention it. If it's something I'm also interested in, I might be like, oh, I've never thought about making that. That would be a lot of fun. I've done several videos already that were viewer suggestions, so I try to, even though it's my channel, I want it to be something people feel, that they have a say in, and that their feedback really matters, because it does. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, I think if you look for Andrew Schmidt and there's a little shell monster, if you look for the artist page, you can find me there. Instagram, I think it's Andrew's Clay Creations. I kind of had to modify the name for each, social media, depending on what was taken. Upcoming events, I'll be at OCON in Council Bluffs, Iowa at the end of June. And that's all I've got scheduled for this year.
I want to thank you for coming on the show, and you guys go check out Andrew's work. because you need to see it. You need to see it in process. You need to go to his channel, and you need to see him serial kill some needle felt.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on Grawlix podcast. I enjoy your show, so it's an honor to be a guest on it.